To relevant and future teachers and taxpayers, I'll be talking about the wealth disparity, especially just in Texas. Surprisingly, we are in the bottom two of the nation with a state educational system. The money the state receives from taxes does not fully cover all of the low-income schools, but anything helps. A very interesting fact is that Texas school funding includes 10% federal funds, 45% state funds, and 45% local property taxes. The school funding in Texas just does not affect the schools and students, it also affects the teachers. It also impacts the community and society as a whole. The low-income school still does not have enough funding to have the same resources as higher-income schools, such as books and textbooks. However, we all love a good viral video about the poor kid who beat all the odds and managed to get into an Ivy League school, but instead we should be asking ourselves why we accept a system that makes such a story such a rarity. In our speech, we'll be covering the wealth disparity in today's schools and what tremendous changes have been made to Texas school funding, and lastly, how important the teaching profession and taxpayers in Texas.
Next is an explanation on the way schools are funded and the controversy behind it. The way schools are funded in Texas depends heavily on local property taxes, up to 45%, which fluctuates greatly between areas. Rich neighborhoods have schools with larger budgets, which means technology access, larger libraries, counselors, nurses, and more. And impoverished neighborhoods, however, might not have those luxuries, and in some cases, the school might not have the necessities. Robin Hood laws enacted in 1993 by the Texas Supreme Court is one attempt at closing this gap. The legislation, simply said, takes money from rich school districts and gives them to the poorer ones. And in the story of Robin Hood, this is justified because the rich are corrupted officials. However, in Texas, they are hardworking taxpayers. The controversy between the impoverished needing all the help they can get and taxpayers feeling robbed from high taxes is being argued to this day.
Let's touch on Edgewood ISD versus Kirby, or as I like to call it, the beginning. I'm doing this so we have a better idea of just how problematic it is for schools to get their majority of their budget from the zip code they're located in. This court case is to this day one of the most polarizing cases in Texas budget history. This is because it has brought to light the inequalities and inequities between the school districts. On May 23rd of 1984, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund filed a suit against Commissioner of Education William Kirby. This court case lasted for years, with both sides presenting arguments against the other, acquiring allies like parents and districts to testify. Ultimately, the legislature gave every school district in Texas 5 options to pick from in order to equalize funding through the schools. However, if a district did not choose one of these options, the state would have to transfer taxable property. Here we have a graph of the state versus local funding in schools, and as you can see, local government funding has been exponentially growing. Some people seem to think that private schools are the answer, and if we were to up the number of private schools, then we would stop relying on state funds to run schools. I think this is such a cop-out answer and completely uneducated. According to the TEA, more than 5 million students are currently enrolled in Texas schools. Private schools just don't have the capacity to accommodate 5 million students, and it's unrealistic to even think that.
This issue affects each one of us. Teacher salaries are affected as they are determined locally. As a result, the resources educators can provide widely differ depending on income. Students in low-income areas are already struggling against the odds, and inadequate school funding only intensifies the disparities. Various data shows us that the correlation between education and literacy rates is something we cannot ignore, as the whole country is negatively impacted when we do. Failure to provide a good education leads to increased cost of welfare and crime and a widening gap between the rising number of job openings in our economy and the number of skilled workers. Each high school graduate adds hundreds of thousands of dollars to the economy as they earn better wages and pay higher taxes, while reducing costs for healthcare, unemployment, and crime, some of which are paid for with our own taxpayer dollars. In Houston, 85% of youth who face the juvenile justice system are illiterate. Unfortunately, economic segregation is worsening in the U.S. Therefore, it is of utmost importance for policymakers to create new equitable approaches to this problem. There has been success in funding high-quality education by some U.S. jurisdictions by implementing strategies such as providing more funding to low-income districts, increasing teacher and principal salaries, and investing in pre-K programs. Interesting enough, these areas are among the highest achieving ones in the world. There are many factors that go into the wealth disparity problem. Therefore, money spent on schools alone will not eradicate the problem or level out the playing field for low-income and minority students. But it is an essential step in the right direction. Thank you.